Okay, ladies and gentlemen,
Scrabble time.
welcome to the Computer Science Colloquium. Next week we'll have Hans von Tilburg. Please make a correction on your program where the S and D keys are on the keyboard right very close, so it came out to be Hand from Tilburg. His name is not Hand, his name is Hans. And he's from Visa, and he's going to tell us about how Visa and all the credit cards are moving toward chips instead of the magnetic storage. Anyway, that's not true.
Is it on the screen?
How many computer garages does it take to...
Does it make a projector work? That's, yeah, never mind.
Yes.
So it's my pleasure to introduce you to Bill Kendrick. Bill was a student here. He graduated in 1998. So that's 14 years ago. And he's going to tell us why we should go back and reuse antique computers. Let's welcome him.
Make it work. One reason to use antique computers is you don't have this problem.
Now they work.
Hey, there we go. All right. There we go. All right, so I grew up in the 80s. Oh, I'm back. So I grew up using old Atari video games and computers and stuff. Okay, why is it doing this?
You hit play.
I did? I don't think I hit anything. No.
Pause.
I hit space, technically. So yeah, back in the day, everybody had a Atari 2600, or if not, you had an Intellivision or a ColecoVision or other things you've probably not heard of because they were not nearly as popular. My actual main computer was an Atari 1200 XL. This was an 8-bit computer, 1.79 megahertz. That's megahertz, not gigahertz, obviously. 64 kilobytes of RAM. The floppy disk could hold about 128K per side. You'd take a hole punch, like for paper, and you'd break the disk on one side, and you flip it over, and you'd have a flippy disk. Eventually, I got a real computer in the early 90s, and that was a late 80s PS2 that a friend handed down to me. I mostly used it for connecting to BBSs, so other people's computers, or Zippy, originally SunOS, then Solaris Unix server here on campus. And I also used it for booting up my Atari using a little serial port widget. And it was basically I think it had 10 megabytes of hard disk. It was basically my floppy drive for my Atari. And interestingly enough, I'm actually basically doing the same thing today with a little tiny embedded system device that reads SD cards. So now I've got a 64 megabyte SD card that basically has countless floppy disks on it for the Atari. And then since '98, right after graduating, I got a real computer. What was it? A Pentium 1.
Is that your Red Hat box?
That was my first. My Red Hat box. It was a Linux box. So I basically went from using Unix here at school to using Linux at home, and I never stopped playing the Ataris. It's not like I'm some guy who decided to go back and relive his past. I just kind of never stopped. Although I have collected more junk since. No. So in 2003, I heard about something called the Vintage Computer Festival down in Mountain View that had been running for a few years, and I was shocked that I hadn't heard of it. And I was also shocked to see that there were Commodore 64s and Apple IIs and IBM PCs and stuff represented there, and no Ataris. So I contacted them and said, "What do I do?" And they said, "Give me $40 and you have a table, bring your Ataris." So I went down there, and I went down a couple other years. And then we had William here in 2006. And then I skipped the next couple of years, and then it didn't happen in 2008. And I started getting kind of antsy, like, I want to do my Atari thing again. So I decided to throw my own one. This is in our last house that we just moved out of. It was a 860 square foot rental. And I asked on Facebook, "Hey friends, who wants to come over and play Atari?" And everybody said yes. So I said, that's not going to work here. I decided to try to rent the room at the public library. And you can do this too. I had a history of doing events there as part of the nonprofit Linux user group that I founded in Davis, and invited some other friends, like where'd Ben go? Ben over here with Ataris. I don't know if you showed up to that one, did you?
Not that one.
Not that one, all right. But I had some other friends with Ataris. I ran it for 3 hours, after hours, and we had about 80 to 100 people wander by. I think I put up maybe 3 flyers in town. So the problem with getting a library, though, is they want educational events. And I'm also not personally a nonprofit doing this, and I couldn't really do it through the Linux user group because it wasn't a Linux thing. So I said, I know people who could come do educational talks, talk about the history of Atari or talk about some technical things that might be interesting. I can put some educational displays together. So there's one right there. That's how pole position works, kind of, the way the screen scrolls to do the road effects. I basically made a paper display to explain sprites and all this stuff and kind of whip them together real fast. But, people were using it. So in doing that, I learned a few things, which you can take away from this. When doing an event with a whole bunch of computers and monitors, worry about power. I forgot that one entire side of the room was all windows, so there were no power strips. Fortunately, somebody brought one of those, a couple actually, long 6-foot things. That was a Bob Woolley. So that saved the day. Otherwise, we would have had to cram everything on one side of the room. The library was closing, so we did it after hours. And they said, "Oh, well, you're plugging all this stuff in. What if you blow a fuse?" And we went, "I hadn't thought of that either." So fortunately, that didn't happen, and we didn't have to call anybody after hours to come fix it because that would have cost $60 or something. And involved the police, probably. I also discovered that when you have guest speakers, there's one particularly, you need to give them strict time limits, otherwise they'll just keep rambling on and on and on and on, and nobody else will get a turn. So we actually had to cancel a couple of the speakers because we didn't have time. I had this neat idea of having different games set up at different systems at different times, which meant me running around every hour to change things around. That was annoying and it was not worth it. So just basically set them up and let people figure it out themselves. Help them if they have questions, but don't kind of interfere. It's also annoying for the people playing to say, like, I'm in the middle of a game. Well, we got to unplug you and hook something else in. And then, as the person running the show, do not expect to have any time to actually play any games, which was sad for me. But then, I've got all this stuff at home. So I decided to do it again. It didn't last long enough. A lot of people actually couldn't make it that day. Other Atarian people found out. We actually had the second year and the third year, this year, people come from Oregon and Washington and actually bring their gear and set up, like bring a truck load of gear and hook up their systems, which I did not expect. And then one of my connections from Vintage Computer Festival actually works in the movie industry, and it turned out that I could play a movie. I can pay money to rent Tron. It's basically the consumer copy of Tron that says at the beginning, the FBI warning not for display. But I paid the money to this company that gives me the rights to play it. So, Tron! We had Tron!
A public viewing.
Yeah, public viewing of Tron, legitimately. So that costs a lot of money. 120, I think I said, or 150, something like that. No, 179? Okay. Less than 200. But a lot of money for something I'm doing for free, basically. And the library in Davis actually closed for construction, so I had to find somewhere else to do it. And it turns out that the best place for me was a little building at a park that the city had, and that cost more money to rent for the day. But you can find sponsors. You can say, hey, I'll put your banner and a link up on the website for this event and put a flyer up with your name on it if you give me some money or send some prizes. And people did that. I had a whole bunch of sponsors for this past year and the year before. I was telling these guys as we walked over that I've kind of become an inadvertent collector because people say, oh, I've got all this Atari stuff I don't want anymore in my garage. You're an Atari guy, do you want it? And I go, well, now that I have a garage of my own, I suppose, sure. But what it turns out is I actually can, assemble some of these components into their own systems and give them away for prizes. Also, we played Tron, which was awesome. It's such a cool movie. If you haven't seen Tron, you have to see Tron. It's basically the first movie with gobs of 3D special effects.
Tell them about the kids.
Oh, so all the adults had seen Tron before, and they're sitting there heckling it, and all the kids are like, shh. I want to see what happens.
These third graders. Be quiet.
Yeah, be quiet. So I put up some posters around town. I actually got on the radio in Sacramento to do an interview. I announced it and said, hey, you want to come in and talk about it? So I, the Friday before the event, I went on the radio and was interviewed about it. And it actually got mentioned in a couple newspapers. It was a don't miss in the Sacramento News and Review, which was cool. So then this past year, we were back at the library because they reopened. But we couldn't be there after hours because their security system doesn't work. They have a lot of, their projector didn't work right. They have a whole bunch of problems since upgrading, which you have to have Plan Bs for. I got invited at the last minute to actually go on TV. They said, come and host a miniature Atari party in our green room. So I'm like, okay, let me see who else wants to get up at 6 a.m. and play Atari and be on TV. And we were basically every once in a while, between segments of the morning news show, they'd show us going, and I had a Mario Brothers off with one of the hosts of the show, and I was being all cocky, and he basically kicked my butt. This is Mario Brothers, not Super Mario Brothers, by the way. This is Atari. Be prepared for the nightmares. You literally have nightmares that you forgot to set things up, or you showed up late, or the car didn't fit everything, or whatever. So I had those for a couple months worrying about it. I got more prizes again this time. This year I did another movie, which is Cloak and Dagger, which involved an Atari game as part of the plot point. Not quite as good as Tron, not quite as interesting to people as Tron. It still cost me, over $100. More guest speakers this time, and I actually downloaded from the Internet Archive old copies or old videos of the Computer Chronicles, which was a PBS show, local KTEH down in the Bay Area. Basically every week they talk about Silicon Valley stuff, and there was a bunch of them that involved Atari because Atari was there at the time, and it was news. So we had those running on a laptop, kind of cycling through. So there's us talking about it on TV, in the newspaper. I don't know where they got the shot of somebody with a joystick, probably off of stock photos or something. So here's what it looks like. You get all these strangers, and you trust them to not steal your little tiny cartridges and sell them on eBay. I wonder where my Cubert is. I don't know if I got rid of it or if somebody lifted it, and they're lost. It's a crappy game. So I got my educational stuff here. One of my Atari 800s that I inherited from somebody didn't work. So I literally tore it apart and stuck it on the back of an old diaper box that we had sitting around for storage. For a while, I used to buy retro gamer magazines at Borders. Remember Borders? So I had a bunch of those out along with just everything. It's a little cut off at the bottom, but boxes of games, and you can see all the awesome box art that they had back in the day. Manuals, all sorts of stuff, just for people to look at and get an idea. So it was huge. It involved, I'll show you in a minute, lots of moving stuff. So there's Paul Kubbich. He ran Atari Program Exchange, which was basically a catalog where people with Atari computers would write software and submit it to the Program Exchange, and if they thought it was good enough, they would sell it in the catalog, and you'd get a cut. Basically a by-mail app store. It was basically the first app store. So now he's going around laughing about, so Apple thinks they're cool with this app store. Well, guess what? So we had a couple speakers, and we also had speech synthesis. I programmed an Atari using some old, it was basically the original software-driven speech synthesizer that was available for the Atari and the Commodore. The company that made it went on to do voice synthesis for the Amiga and for Microsoft Windows and who knows what else these days. They're basically the original software speech synthesis folks. But I took their little plug-in for BASIC, and I wrote a program with a welcome message and little games, and it would sit there and annoy you if you didn't touch it. And I just had it set up as the person at the entrance of the room. Welcome to Atari Party. Play game. So we had people watching Cloak and Dagger, and there's Computer Chronicles. That's Bill Budge. He's a luminary video game designer for back in the day. I believe that's Bill Budge, yeah. So time was short. Basically, we only had about 5 hours for the show, between 12 and 5 p.m., then we got kicked out. I used the first couple hours to actually set everything up. But we still had, basically a 2-hour movie to play at the end. Not being Tron, it wasn't really worth it. So this next year, if I do it, or whatever year I do it again, not going to do a movie unless we do Tron again, basically, because it's the one that everyone wants. There's the new Tron too.
And you can go after hours, but they fix the security system.
They haven't fixed the security system. Not that I've heard.
Tron was such a fabulous movie. It's a pity they never made a sequel.
Finally! I think they're going to make sequels of this sequel too. So.
Oh yeah, they set that up.
Yeah,
Yeah, she's
yeah.
in the world.
Yeah. Bum bum bum. So, what am I saying here? I had a lot of stuff. Even though it wasn't just me bringing it all, I had like the bulk of it because I have multiple game systems that I was bringing. I had all the prizes, including full computer systems and game systems that I was bringing. All of the magazines, I was going to swear, and books. Oh my god, the books are so heavy. All these books from the 80s. And then modern books too, about the history of video games that I brought there. That hopefully somebody spent 5 seconds looking at, otherwise it's a waste of time. Oh my god, who's got a truck? Because I couldn't fit it all in the car, so I had to find a truck. So be prepared for transport. So, if you want to do something like this, it doesn't have to be Atari. You can be an Apple II aficionado or something like that. Hi, Andrew. You got to find a venue. You have to plan ahead for finding a venue, months ahead usually, so that you can know where it's going to be, so that you can advertise it, which you have to do ahead of time. You need to find volunteers if you're not going to do it all by yourself. I do not recommend doing it all by yourself if you're going to do anything big. And you need to plan ahead for advertising. Some places need it has to be no later than the middle of the prior month before our next month calendar comes out or whatever. And obviously get to know the local wikis, the local calendars, the local newspapers and stuff, and figure out how to submit events to them. And then be prepared for them to come back and say, "Ooh, can we interview you? You're going to be on TV, on the radio, on the magazine, whatever." Find a venue with power and space and as accessible. The problem with our second year one is we had people lugging stuff without carts from a parking lot, like maybe 150, 200 feet to the entrance of the building in the park. That sucked. At the library, you just basically park up to it and you walk right in. So, and you obviously need appropriate space. This would be a great room for this, by the way. Find volunteers and try to delegate. Don't try to do everything yourself, which is hard for me because I'm bad at delegating. And like I said, Usenet, that's a good place for posting stuff for cronies to learn. That's how I learned about Vintage Computer Festival. I had this big ASCII graphic at the top of the post about the Vintage Computer Festival. I'm like, what's this? I've never heard of it. So why do I do it? Well, I'm a big fat nerd. I like the old systems and the old games. I actually had somebody, I did mini versions of this the past 2 weekends for the Yolo County Library System, one in West Sac and one in Davis.
Which is another risk. You should be prepared.
Be prepared to be asked to do it again. I've been asked to do like 4 other ones as far away as Sunnyvale. So I had a little kid, like a 10-year-old kid, say, "It's so cool that you have all this stuff," and they made all these old games. Because the new games are cool, but it's so cool to see that the old games were fun too. So it's cool to share and to educate and remind people this is where it came from. Because really, I mean, we're right at the beginning of this. I mean, when you think about it, 30, 40 years ago, this stuff like barely existed, didn't exist, and you're talking about like core kernel of it. One thing I've been thinking about a lot, actually, Dr. Ladine, when I was in your graphics class, you basically told us all we had to watch Toy Story. And we watched it again the other day, and prior to that we watched A History of Pixar. Oh my god, like it's amazing how like nowadays it's, a dime a dozen, like car commercials are just exploding with animation. But this was not easy stuff, 20, 30 years ago. So we're really at the beginning of what's going on when it comes to video games and graphics and just computers in general. Obviously people like, I remember Pac-Man, I spent so many quarters on it. They like the nostalgia and they like the novelty.
Even if they're not old enough to remember it. Like,
yeah, how do I play this again? Well, some people are like, oh my god, I haven't played this game in 30 years and I can play it all of a sudden. It's like riding a bike or something. And video games in general are fun. So here's a heartwarming montage of little children enjoying games. That kid right there, looked like he was about to cry. He won an Atari 1200 XL, which is coveted. That's the best Atari computer. Has the best keyboard as any computer I've ever used.
he got one of the grand prize. He was super excited.
Yeah, he was very excited. So, a kid won an Atari computer the previous one too. Oh, is it getting cut off? Oh, that's terrible.
You can pull it down.
Go like this, maybe? Hey, point your phones at that. So basically, I've got a website where I've got the archive of what was going to happen and what happened, and all the photos and some videos and so forth of the 3 to 5 events that I've done. Over there. So in the meantime, I'll talk a little bit about, since I've got some time, how people are keeping this technology alive. So say you've got yourself, this is not technically an old one, but one of these old what the hell is this is, which I have kids, how do you use this? This is a joystick, it's for playing games. You can actually get an adapter for USB that lets you, it basically turns into a HID device, or HID, human interface device, USB joystick, right there. We actually had as prizes a device from, I think, the company that designed this system. They basically put this and this together, and you have an Atari joystick with a USB on the end. So you can geek out to your old emulated games on your PC using the correct hardware. For computer geeks like me, there are ways to actually program cartridges now using flash memory. And originally, you'd have to do it on the Atari. You'd boot the Atari up into some disk that would write the bits to it through the Atari. Well, recently, they devised basically you have an IDE on Windows, and you plug it in, and you say, I want this disk, set of disks to be on this cartridge. And then you plug it in the Atari, and the Atari boots up and says, what do you want to play? Like I mentioned, I actually have got a little device that plugs into my Atari's I/O port, serial I/O port. It was a daisy-chainable 13-pin plug that nobody else used. I believe the guys that designed it went on to make USB. Basically, like I said, it's a replacement for booting off of a PC with a serial port. It lets me, stick an SD card in. I download my games off the internet over Wi-Fi. I plug it in here. I copy them to that. Plug it on the Atari. Push a couple buttons on the little device. Turn on the Atari, and the Atari goes, "Hey, where's my 5 1/4-inch floppy drive?" And it goes, "Oh, here I am." Wink, wink. And boots up. So you can boot an Atari 2600 off of a CD-ROM. There's all sorts of crazy stuff you can do. And then if you just want, your plug-and-play, appliance toaster device, you can get something like the Atari Flashback, which this is actually an Atari 2600 redesigned into a smaller form factor with 40 built-in games. If you tear it apart, you can actually add a cartridge port to it, and when you find those 50-cent cartridges at the music store, you can plug them into this. Unfortunately, they didn't decide to do that out of the box. And then there's emulators, and there's disc collections for PlayStation and Wii and Xbox, and downloads for iPhone and Android and Flash games, and all sorts of ways to play all the old games and enjoy them.
The joysticks are targeted, right? That have all the games built in?
Yeah, those are Nintendos on a chip. I don't like this, but yeah, there's they're Ataris, but they're not. This is actually an Atari 2600 inside. It can play almost any Atari 2600 game. Some of the other Atari games in a stick or on a paddle, those are actually a Nintendo. Remember the Nintendo Entertainment System, Super Mario Brothers? It's a Nintendo on a chip is what they call it, that emulates those games. And then sometimes they do something ridiculous like have a paddle game that they make you use with a joystick or something like that. Show of hands, who knows what a paddle is? It is a rotary controller. Can you all say rotary controller?
Rotary controller.
It's basically a resistor. It's got one digital button. It's just an analog knob. That's how you play Pong or Breakout. You get something that moves around as fast as you can spin the knob. As opposed to, well, actually, I guess it's not a rotary controller, is it? It's a rotary controller is more like a mouse, in that it ticks, so it can go all the way around as many times as you want. That'd be like your volume knob on a modern stereo versus the old stereo resistor-based one. I don't know much about it.
So you made us say something that wasn't true.
Guess what? The rotary controller and the paddles look exactly the same. They just act differently. All right, so I rambled on enough. Anybody's got questions? Who here is into old video games or old computers? Or? Hopefully, yeah, the older people.
Anyone under 30?
Yeah.
Well, I don't think this counts, but I still have the first computer, so it's about 11 years old, which isn't quite as old as the late 80s, but right now it's in the garage, but I know it still works perfectly.
So it's 3.5 floppy drive and tiny hard drive. So it's a PC,
Yeah, PC.
like Pentium, or earlier.
It wasn't Pentium.
Pentium. Okay, yeah. So that was basically the beginning of the golden age of PCs, I suppose, when PCs were fast enough and the internet was just coming out. Well, the internet was becoming known, I suppose. The internet's been around since like the 60s. You got your WWWs that you can go to finally. What about you, Dr. Lideen? Do you have any old gear that you hold on to, or do you just keep moving on?
Too much.
Too much.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about stuff?
Touch paint. Okay. Well, here, I'll give you a little story about my son here. He's actually been playing some of my old Atari games that I played as a kid. One of them they had fun with, well, he actually started crying at one point when it took over for him. One of them they had fun with last night was an educational game. This is, I think, right before they had the term edutainment. And long before edutainment was considered a curse of a name. Basically a game where you're playing a game on a computer, and every once in a while the computer breaks. And your little guy goes inside and tries to figure out what's wrong with the computer. Is it the graphics? Is it the ROM? Is it the disk? Is it simply not plugged in? Stuff like that. And as kind of an added bonus difficulty, there's little static sparks that you have to avoid. Otherwise, you get charged so much that the next thing you touch breaks too, and you have to spend some of your points from the meta game in fixing the computer. Metagame, yeah. It's kind of it's a game in a game. Yeah, I've written some games for him in BASIC and in some higher level languages on the Atari.
Don't touch the water.
Don't touch the water, yeah. So you can write a game that entertains a 4-year-old for an hour in BASIC and about 100 lines and maybe 20 minutes of time on an old 1 megahertz computer, basically. And it's still fun for them, even though it's not PlayStation. So and it's an interesting challenge because you have to think a little bit differently in terms of how much memory you have, what you can even do with the graphics, let alone with how much graphics you can have. Basically, it was an ASCII game. It was just text on a big screen in a particular mode that can do different colors. You know what? I'm actually going to put this. And the objective of the game was an idea that he had as we were walking around a store, and that was don't step on the blue tiles because those are water and you'll get hurt. You have to run across them. So I basically came up with a game. You read the joystick and you move a little X around the screen, and if it touches the little blue pieces, then you lose some score or some health until you die. And then, well, we need an objective. All right, dollar signs. All right, get the money. Get all the money. And then there's one hole on the screen. That's the exit. Get to the exit. And then basically, it's kind of like Gauntlet, yeah, without the ghosts. And basically, you go to the next level, and there's more water, but also more money. And you don't necessarily need to get all the money to leave. It behooves you to get all the money if you can.
The point is with these old computers, you can write a game that entertains a child in very few lines of code. And they're actually, I would say, better than the modern games because there's 4 choices.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
compared to Xbox or PC with a keyboard.
Yeah.
And in that sense, you need to be a little restricted. Like there was
so they don't get frustrated when they play longer.
There was an arcade game that I discovered, actually just kind of semi-recently, called Mousetrap, and it was kind of a Pac-Man knockoff. You were a mouse, which could turn into a dog. That was kind of your Pac-Man superpower. And there were random cats going around the screen, and you were supposed to eat cheese. It makes as much sense as Pac-Man. I mean, Pac-Man, by the way. But it had doors that you could make the doors switch positions, and there were different colored doors. They didn't do the different colored doors, but they still give you the doors on the Atari version, but it only had one button, and the button would either, if you tapped it, it would turn you into the dog, or if you held it down, think, double click versus single click, it would move the doors. So they actually came up with an interface using one button to do 2 different things just based on timing. Where'd Roger go?
You had a question there.
Oh, you had a question? Yeah, go ahead.
Why don't you run it off of the computer? Like you could have if you have all the programs on the computer, and you have a USB port for the joystick, why don't you just run it off the computer rather than the system?
It doesn't feel the same sometimes. For some of the software, the emulators aren't quite good enough. They don't know all of the bugs that some of the games took advantage of, or some of the demos. That sound too? So let's see if I know how to actually. Hey, a new monitor has been connected. I gotta activate my mouse. And we'll say clone of.
Okay.
Where am I? Oh, well, that's above, but whatever. There's my mouse. All right, so. Oh my goodness, where did I put it?
Alien transmission.
Sound. Let's see if it'll handle being made bigger.
Is this something you wrote?
No.
So this is the Atari 8-bit computer running a demo that's basically a clone of a demo on the Amiga computer from 1995. And somehow, using wizardry, use that meme, are you a wizard? Yeah, the Polish wizardry, I think these guys are Polish. They basically reconstructed it on the 8-bit Atari, running at 1.79 megahertz, using its standard graphics hardware and so forth. And, you know, it's kind of blocky, but this is another reason to run the real thing, is you get some of the benefits of the artifacts. Actually, I might be able to do that. So let's go to display settings. NTSC filter. Ah, look at that! Look at that! Oh, it's so crappy looking. You got your little black scan lines. You got the weird colors. The artifact thing. So that looks a little bit better. It's doing. I mean, this 2 gigahertz computer is doing all this math to make it look like a crappy NTSC. But even then, it's still not 100% accurate because, I mean, there might be some things that some of these demos do that the emulator will crash on. It will just say, like, I don't know how to do that CPU code that's not documented by, you know, MOS technologies in the 1970s. But if you do it a certain way, the Atari can do something cool, or, you know, there's weird graphics tricks that basically the emulator guys have to go, oh, nobody knew that you could make the Atari do that until, like, the late 90s or early 2000s, so now we're going to have to, like, take that into account. So.
Now, what version of the processor did the 800 use?
6502.
So the straight 65.
It might be the C.
Not the C.
I think it's a 65. It's a 65C02.
6502C.
All right, C.
And it's customized. It's a little modified.
I'm not a hardware guru, even with the old Atari stuff.
How many pixels would this thing have natively? Is it just NTSC? I mean,
up to 320 by 192, not counting the overscan of the borders that it could do. This is obviously much lower. This is probably 80 by 48 or something like that. Or, I mean, that's the thing, though, is you've got those guys up at the top. Those are sprites. And those are at a different resolution. They're being handled completely differently than the bitmap graphics that are being, you know, rendered real time with this whatever faux ray tracing thing that's going on here. There's also neat things you could do with. Oops. Oh. It needs more memory than it. Select system, we'll say 192. Come on. Where's my mouse?
It's over here.
Oh, no wonder. There we go. So that was actually an old pre-rendered demo from the Amiga.
Lovely.
And it, come on, I forget if I can pause the emulator. But it's basically, it's using persistence of vision. It's basically got 4 colors per scan line, but it's flickering between like 3 different screens or 2 different screens to give you more colors.
On a lot of emulators, if you hold the window and getting ready to move it, it pauses it.
No, where's my mouse? There it is. No, not this one. So this one actually is set up to take multi-frame screenshots, so you can get kind of interpretation of what the persistence of vision would do. You don't get the weird interlace effect. You get what your eyes actually see at 60 or 50 hertz.
I remember a long time ago when you and I were in Dr. Levine's intro to programming class. He said we could turn in our assignments in any format. I'm curious. Did you ever turn any in on an Atari clock?
No, but I did write a game on the Atari while I was still in college, and I wrote it in a high-level language called Action, which was kind of C-ish, kind of Pascal-ish. Oh God, who here knows what Pascal is? And I ported it to C and XLib to run on the Unix server. And would run it on our old Mac 2s over the external display, basically. And it was basically a little puzzle game based on something that I saw in the arcade. And I was just thinking the other day, I should have got extra credit for that. And that game actually, that was the way I first learned about this kind of cartridge, was the guy who made that cartridge, right when he first made it, he stuck my game on it. He made a specific label with my game artwork on it, and he mailed it to me, sight unseen. I'm like, how'd you do that? Because it was a disc game. I'm like, how did you get it to be on a cartridge? And it was, because the cartridge pretends to be a disc. Gemdrop, yeah. And actually, Gemdrop, the Linux version, is running on Virgin Airlines Red entertainment display system, including with my face bouncing around. And I've heard that there are issues with I had a little Easter egg with my face would bounce around on the title screen. One of my friends was on the plane, they took a photo of them trying to read CNN website with my face bouncing around. I don't even know how that's possible. Like, that should not be possible. But anyway, so this is a much older demo where they're doing, very basic polygonal stuff. And they, these people who hack on this stuff, they go into competitions, they win, 500 euros a piece, figuring out how to make the old computer do this. And it's kind of like an open learning thing where they figure out how people do it on PCs or how they do it on the Amigas and other 16 and 32-bit computers. And they say, oh, well, we can do a smaller version of that on this old 8-bit. Some of it involves like lookup tables or pre-rendered stuff, but and a lot of times they fit in as little as 64K. And look at this, like some kind of alpha blending thing going on there. I would have no idea how they would do this. And it doesn't help that I don't know assembly language on the 6502 either. So. Like, this is an easy trick right there. That, no idea. The background is probably sprites, and then the foreground is stuff that they drew. And then this one, the foreground is sprites, and the background is just solid color that they're doing some weird thing with. Anyway, and all like that. So that's it. It's fun, and they can do neat things. Hello, how are you?
Fine. Do you have any light pen stuff?
I do, but guess it wouldn't work on this.
Do you know how they work?
They wait for the beam to hit a particular spot.
Yeah, I worked on a system, in fact, before I came with the Cinema State.
And it makes your arms really tired.
In the 80s. And the way it worked was it paints blue across the screen. It starts at the upper left corner, and then it paints stripes of blue, and the end of the light pin is sensitive to blue. And so when you touch the screen is being painted, and when it gets to that tip, then it sends the position back to the system.
Yeah, and it sounds slow, but it's doing it, 60,000 times a second.
Well, you can, in the system I worked on, you could actually see it.
See it paint, yeah.
If you were down low.
Yeah, I've actually got a touchpad that I got recently for the Atari, brand new, from a company that just had old Atari stuff and never sold it. There's like 2 or 3 of those companies in the U.S. still. They get stockpiles, so like when a warehouse goes under, they just get pallets of Atari stuff and crack it open and add it to the catalog. But basically, it was a touch-sensitive tablet, and you read it more or less as paddles. So it would give an amount of resistance from 0 to 228, 0 to 228, something like that, and that give you your XY coordinates, and you just had a button on the device and a button on the little stylus that plugged in via a wire. It was just, that's all it did was a fire button, and you could tell where you were clicking on the screen. And then, I've got a light pen that actually the graphics software, I haven't played with it much, but William was screwing around with it and getting totally lost in all the options. It has symmetry mode, it has snap to grid, it has all these weird features that I would not expect from an old 8-bit paint program, because I'm used to them for the more modern stuff like GIMP and Photoshop. But it had all this stuff built in, pattern fills and multiple thicknesses of lines and all this incredible stuff.
Photoshop.
Yeah. But you can't use it on a modern TV. You can't use light guns on modern TVs either.
Actually, can I ask, do you have, were there light guns for the Atari?
There were. I think they officially came out later, after the Nintendo's light gun was really popular. But it's basically a light pen, just from a distance. It probably has a lens or something.
May I say something about Nintendo?
What about Nintendo?
Well,
the
light guns worked about the same way. Like with Duck Hunt, the whole screen when you
Don't
pull the trigger, the whole screen would
He's
go.
going to beg for Duck Hunt again.
Oh, sorry. The whole screen would go dark except for the one little square.
Yeah,
around,
to give you
target.
a better idea of where it was. Yeah.
And I discovered that it was actually easier to hit the screen if I was 15 feet away.
Really?
So I'd have my friends over, right? And they'd all be like
They'd be right up
the
there.
screen.
Bam, 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 bam. Yeah, you just
oh, guys.
You point in the general direction of the screen, and you do both ducks, probably, right? Yeah.
Just pretend I'm really awesome, way back.
What's funny, we've got an orange zapper. This is an interesting thing about back then. We've got this orange zapper. It looks like a little laser tag gun or something. But the original one was gray, and I think it looked way too much like a real gun, and there was issues where kids playing with realistic-looking guns would get shot by police. So Nintendo's like, we better make it look flashy. So that kind of makes me wonder if there's an underground... no, not Fight Club. Basically, people take real guns and paint them wacky colors to make. Oh no, it's not a real gun.
Actually, there is. Bruce Schneier had a blog post about it a couple months ago.
Oh,
Yep.
That's like California state law, actually, that safety orange color has to be incorporated in all of our guns.
It's a laser gun.
Well, any other questions?
Well, you weren't a Nintendo fan?
I was a big Nintendo fan, and that's actually one of the things I did when I just like Atari a lot, and I know a lot of Atari people. And I don't have quite as much Nintendo and Sega and so forth, although I've been getting a little bit more of that thanks to in-laws. But when I was invited by the library to do the Atari thing, I said, well, I've got all these other systems that are basically just as ancient for a teenager. I can bring the Nintendo and the Sega as well. So I brought those. And she was like, what is this Echo the Dolphin thing? Okay, well, thank you, everyone. Does the CS department want to borrow this and hook it up somewhere?
I'll borrow it. For a while. I agree.
I've got Yogi Bear. Oh, yeah, here we go. You want to hug to it'll be a liner. We're going to get lunch. If I get invited, I'd love to.
No, you're supposed to leave that.
You want goji berries? Can you be real careful with them? You should have eaten your bacon this morning.
Every year I wish I could go.
Well, I don't know if it's going to happen.
Thank you. I have no idea what to go to there yet, but I assume it's not toxic.
What did I say? Oh yeah, I don't know what we're doing next.
Yeah, you're talking about Lunar.
Oh no, Lewis. We just meet with the neighbors. Just starting to feel it kick around more. It's interior assembly, which means it's basically I'm talking about you're finally able to feel the thing. Yeah, another boy.
So now for sticking a cartridge port into one of those things, do you don't know the details?
I don't know the details. I think you need to actually get the thing that is the cartridge port and then wire it up, like with probably an IDE cable or something like that. Yeah, I don't know.
I've got an actual 2600 that's there.
I've got the Family 2600, which I finally just double checked still work, but I've got a 7800.
I finally learned how to solder a couple years ago.
Which I just got a soldering iron.
Which I just felt. Well, I just felt so deficient. I just felt so deficient. You know, a nerd who didn't solder until I was over 30. You know, it's like, what's wrong with me?
I'm not a hardware guy. I've never. Did you get
Do you see Junior Pac-Man?
I see Junior Pac-Man.
No fire truck.
That is awesome.
Yeah. Just wanted to make sure that you got it. That's cool.
Yeah.
I actually found a couple of, I had already found a couple of sites on the net that had
Original.
couch studios.
Oh, okay.
But I need to, well, we need to
Six?
download them.
Yeah. I was sending it to you one for your own. For your own.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah, I can see that.
eventually load.
It's kind of like a Wii controller, but no, not at all like Wii controller.
Yeah, sometimes it's fine and other times
It's pretty, but not comfortable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Seriously? That's all I can write that down.
Oh, you want to go?
Like built in. Or you just use and that's it. Because I know you can do track. I think the only thing you use the track. You use the track all the time. The track all code right now just works like a pinch counter. It goes direction and goes the same speed. Yeah, it does.
Yeah, you started. I know, and that's why I was wondering if I understand why.
How's it going?
You would have that right up in front of you like that.
Oh, no,
Flash into me. Asshole.
I know. Just as I go with it.
What is that?
This? It's Kindle.
I get it, I'm like,
So much fun. I get New York Times. I did a 2-week free trial for the New York Times.
That's fucking weird.
I can't cover this up.
It looks fake, right?
Yeah. Well, it's not touchscreen, so that's good. But that's good because it's just good for the eyes. It's not necessarily like if I had an iPad, I know my eyes would get, or I'd get headaches, so just something like that. This is pretty much like the regular, almost piece of paper anyway. Maybe we should put it in.
Read that one. Did you answer or not?
How did you put A? E.
What's that?
I have that same question, so it's if I had the changes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that doesn't make sense. I put the same thing.
You did wrong.
Yeah.
I said we're behind. She's happy when they wouldn't increase the supply because demand increases because they want so much profit. You get that?
I think it makes more sense.
Exactly. That's right.
Alright guys, we'll get started. So before I go back to the briefly feelings about inflation and talk about interest rates, do you have any questions about the exam, the answer keys?
For the facts question, which of the following would be expected to cause an increase in the supply of fax machines? The answer is D. And for me, I don't know, the way I'm thinking now, I feel like D would have more effect on the demand more so than the supply.
It would affect both.
Okay.
But it would affect the firms are expecting the price of the product to fall in the future, they want to produce more now when the price is going to be high, right? Because that means per unit they'll be making more profit for given cost.
Okay, so they'll be expecting people to buy more in the future because the price will fall, or
you want to sell more when the price is high.
Okay.
So a price expectation, you're right, affect both the supply side and the demand side.
Okay.
Any other questions? No?
I didn't see it. Were you going to tell us, based on the curve, what percentage was considered A, B?
I can briefly explain. I don't curve each exam separately. I curve at the end, but I can give you roughly. Like if that was the only exam you were to take this semester with me, well, so I didn't give you a calculation, but because my somewhere I'm pretty.
So we're thinking we were thinking
The grade, the distribution looks already like a bell shape, so it already looks like a normal distribution with most of you being around the mean. So the curving is pretty easy to do. So I'll just roughly tell you.
Makes a lot more sense. That's right. The last one I changed it.
So when you curve, in case you don't remember how that works, the point of curving is to adjust the grade so that the passing grade would be close to the mean. So if the mean of the class here is almost 68%, it means that if you have around 68% on this exam, you get a C. Okay? So because my mean is clearly below 75, I can't do you need to have above 90% to get an A or 80% to get a B. So what it means is everything is kind of like shifted a little bit in that direction. So I would say, and that's usually what I do because,